This is really important, and I'm going to say it again. Your nervous system never lies to you. It doesn't make things up. It doesn't randomly overreact, but it does sometimes respond to old information. So the alarm might be detecting a real threat in the present moment, a familiar threat from the past, or a story that feels true to the body. The work isn't to shut the alarm off. The work is to get curious. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. Hi, and welcome back to Grow with Robin. Let me tell you guys, it is so cold in the D. And if none of you are from Detroit, then you probably don't know that there is a song called It's So Cold in the D, and it actually went viral. It's pretty funny to watch, but it's the truth. It is cold over here, and I know that it's cold in a lot of places right now in the US. So I decided I'm going to stay kind of in my sweats and my cozy outfit and record an episode because it is time that we talk about attachment styles on here. I know we've mentioned it. I know I've had guests on and they've brought up different attachment styles. So today I'm going to give you like a quick dive into it, and then we'll do some further episodes so that you guys understand this really neat theory that is a really great tool to understand when being able to understand and hack your own nervous system. So for me, understanding my attachment style and the energy I was bringing into my relationships was truly a game changer for me. Because for most of my life, I thought I just loved deeply, felt deeply, cared more, was more emotional, more sensitive, more intense. And often that led to me feeling like I was too much. But what I didn't understand yet was that my nervous system was often leading the way, not a conscious, regulated part of me. So once I learned about attachment, everything clicked. So let's go back to the core of what attachment is, right? We study attachment through the lens of attachment theory, which was developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth. At its core, it's based on a pretty simple idea. The bonds we form with our caregivers early in life become the blueprint for how we relate to people as adults. So long before we were consciously choosing partners or relationships, our nervous system was already learning things like, can I depend on you? Are you emotionally available? Do I need to fight for a connection? Pull away to stay safe, or freeze because I don't know what's coming next? And once again, here comes that inner child. As kids, we were not thinking, oh, this is my attachment. This is my attachment style. We were just trying to stay safe, connected, and regulated in the environments we were given. And those strategies, they didn't disappear. They grew up with us. So how we attached when we were younger was really how we learned to deal with emotional pain. Not intellectually, not consciously, but emotionally and in our bodies. So if someone we depended on was unavailable, we became hypervigilant. We altered our behavior. We tried to control the outcome so that we wouldn't lose the connection. If someone invaded our space emotionally or physically, we learned to create distance in order to protect ourselves. And if someone was inconsistent, sometimes safe, sometimes not, sometimes available, sometimes not, we began to doubt ourselves, lose trust in others, and often freeze, stuck with a very loud inner critic. So I want you to think about it this way. Attachment isn't a flaw or, oh God, I had all this childhood trauma, I'm screwed. It was protective. And that part really matters. Your attachment style is not a flaw. It's not a character defect. It's not something to shame yourself for. In fact, my anxious attachment, I thought meant I was crazy. When I would send you 25 texts in a row, maybe 50, given the amount of activation that I was going through, it didn't mean I was crazy. It meant I was so dysregulated because a familiar threat was around me. So your default attachment style was actually the most intelligent way your nervous system knew how to survive emotional pain at that time. Attachment is simply an emotional bond. And those bonds were formed in environments where you were trying to stay safe and connected. You are not just one attachment style. I know that most of us that have learned about attachment think that we are one of these things. I teach 4 attachment styles. You are not just one attachment style. I know that many of us learn that like we're one of these 4 attachment styles. So I want to slow this part down because this is where a lot of people get stuck. You are not one attachment style all the time. You have different protectors that come online in different situations. You might be more anxious in romantic relationships with unavailable partners, or in situations where there's some neglect going on and your needs aren't getting met. You might be more avoidant when it comes to money or financial stress. You might be more ambivalent or frozen with authority figures like a boss. And that doesn't mean you are inconsistent. It means your nervous system is responding to familiar threats. That being said, the way I work with attachment styles with my clients is that you do default to one of the attachment styles over others in states of activation or conflict. And that's the one we really want to get curious with, because that is the default that we need to shine the light of consciousness on. So over my 10 years of work with people and working on myself, I've had my own journey with attachment styles. Like I said, my anxious attachment, I thought was a curse. I thought it meant I was crazy. And then over time, when I started paying attention to this attachment energy that would come up, I realized, oh, this isn't an indicator of like how wounded I am. It's an alarm in my nervous system. So your attachment styles, they're not personality traits. In fact, when your attachment system is activated, it means that your trauma responses are up. You are not your trauma responses. That is not who you are in your authenticity. Those are maladaptive protectors coming up. So your attachment styles are alarms from your nervous system. They are your nervous system's alarm response to a familiar threat. Remember, your nervous system is a threat detector. It has literally imprinted every moment of your life, specifically moments in which you were threatened or dysregulated by something, and it embedded in your nervous system, and it lets you know when it is around. Specifically, and we'll get into this more in future episodes, I have found that your attachment system never lies to you. It is always a warning. And that warning is either it means that it's in your environment, like, hey, there's an unavailable person in your environment. There's someone engulfing you in your environment. There's someone confusing you, or it's in the story you're telling yourself. And that's a really, really big epiphany. So I'm not going to leave it just in this episode. We'll talk about it in further episodes. So once you learn the language of your nervous system, your attachment style stops being your identity and starts being really good information. And I get a lot of feedback from you guys as listeners and from my clients where like one of the most profound things that we talk about in this work is like collect data, collect data, collect data. So we're not just collecting data on other people. We're collecting data on ourselves. We're collecting data on our nervous system and how it responds and reacts. So let's talk about the 4 attachment styles. The first one is an anxious attachment, which in the 4 F's, which is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and I did an episode on those, an anxious attachment is your fight response. The core alarm here is abandonment, rejection, or emotional neglect. And that means that the origin of this wound is that somewhere in your primary caregiver relationships, you experienced abandonment, rejection, and neglect. For most of us, we have experienced emotional neglect because our parents didn't know how to emotionally attune to us. So the default trauma response in an anxious attachment, or the way that we emotionally regulate, is do something, fix this, act now, control the outcome. When an anxious attachment is activated, your nervous system is saying abandonment, rejection, and or neglect is present in your environment or the story you're telling yourself. And the more we get curious with those reactions and responses, like for instance, one time I was in a room full of people, all of which I knew and was very familiar with, and they were lovely people. And I felt really, really anxious. And I got curious with myself, like, why is that one person making me feel anxious? Or why am I anxious in this room full of people? And I identified that there was one person in the room that as soon as I walked in, looked me up and down a few times. When I was talking, I could sense the energy of judgment, and it didn't feel safe or comfortable. And there was a high risk of rejection going on through that judgment. And I was able to say, oh, okay, that person's nice, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable around them. So now I know I can adjust the things that I disclose, because maybe there's some things I don't want to be judged on. Or maybe I could put a little bit more distance in that environment between me and that person. But your nervous system, it never lies to you. I really don't speak in absolutes in this work. That is one absolute I have so much data on. So sometimes we can go, but wait, it's not in my environment, because that's happened to me too. And I want you to check the story you're telling yourself. It might be like, that person doesn't like me. That person thinks my outfit is stupid. Whatever it is, then there's rejection, abandonment, or neglect in the story we're telling ourselves. But I promise you, I have never seen a time where that alarm in our body is off. And it is trying to alert you to that thing that hurt you. It's here. It's either in your environment or it's in the story you're telling yourself. And let's get a healthy protector on board. What are healthy protectors? Boundaries. What are healthy protectors? Voice and choice. We can go on and on. In fact, I think I will do an episode on healthy protectors. A great idea. I'm going to write that down. So let's talk about the next attachment style, which is an avoidant attachment style. Now, in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, an avoidant attachment is a flight response. We are getting distance from the thing that is activating us. So the core alarm here from your nervous system is that enmeshment or emotional overwhelm are present. Okay. Now, this one can be a little bit confusing, but enmeshment really means that there were not appropriate boundaries between you and your caregiver growing up. So that might mean that you felt their feelings, you felt emotionally or physically responsible for that caregiver. It could be that that caregiver was putting you under a microscope and you didn't consent to that level of being seen or witnessed. It could be that you had a very controlling caregiver in which your autonomy and agency was challenged within that relationship. So it really means that you were in relationship with someone and it was really hard to determine the difference between you and them, your feelings, their feelings, your opinions, their opinions, your dreams, their dreams. Like I have an amazing client who got an opportunity to go to Harvard, and it wasn't her dream. She had a different dream for the school that she wanted to attend, but her mom wanted her to go to Harvard. And of course, everyone in America is like, why would you not go to Harvard? And it was so cute. We were talking about that time in her life, and she was telling me the story, and she said, so I went to Harvard and it was okay. And we realized that like Harvard wasn't her dream and that that's okay. And that was a moment in her life where she chose doing what was right or what was right by someone else's standards, her mom, her family, society, over what was aligned for her. So there's a lot of things that can contribute to an avoidant attachment, but the core of it is enmeshment, that you were not able to have autonomy and agency in the relationship that wounded you. So the way that we emotionally regulate when that is up is we say, get space, shut down, and guard and prioritize your independence over anything, which is why in an anxious attachment, we will prioritize the connection over protecting ourselves. In an avoidant attachment, we will prioritize protecting ourselves over being in connection, because that level of connection is the threat or was the threat growing up. So when an avoidant attachment is activated, it's your nervous system's way of saying, hey, enmeshment is present. Again, either in my environment or in the story I'm telling myself. So in an avoidant attachment, what we're really seeking, and if we call on that healthy protector to come on board, instead of shutting down, instead of creating physical or emotional distance in a relationship, we can practice voice, choice, and boundaries. So number one, in enmeshment, the first thing we need is boundaries. We need to become an autonomous person in that relationship again. And then we want to utilize the two things that we didn't get when we were growing up, which is one, we do have choice. We always have agency, and we need to connect to what it is that we want or what it is that is in alignment for us. And then we need to be able to verbalize that and ask or advocate for what we need. And then we have an ambivalent attachment response, which is that push-pull attachment. And in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that would be the freeze response. So the core alarm here is confusion and unpredictability. It means that we had a primary caregiver that was confusing, that was sometimes anxious, sometimes avoidant, and we never really knew what we were going to get. And because the nervous system can't identify what's safe or what's coming, it freezes. Because in an ambivalent attachment response, we don't trust ourselves and we don't trust others. So I want you to think about it. If you were activated in something that was really scary or really overwhelming or had a ton of pressure in it, and you didn't trust yourself and you didn't trust other people, and that includes the universe, God, creator, source, the future, where are you going to go? You're going to freeze. That's probably the safest thing you can do. And what your nervous system is saying is, oh, I don't have enough clarity to move forward safely. So confusion is a primary emotional experience in an ambivalent attachment wound. So when an ambivalent attachment wound is up, it is an alarm from your nervous system that you are confused and that you are stuck. So what do we need? Remember, in this work, we do a lot of treating by opposites, like super complex, also super not complex, right? So if we're stuck, the opposite of stuck would be action. So it means that whenever we are in a freeze response or we're stuck and we don't know the next course of action, that we want to choose anything, because anything is different than being stuck. Now, I am going to, for the next 4 episodes, I'm going to break each attachment style down so that we can dig a little deeper into each one. For now, I want you guys just to hear it and kind of sense out like what sounds familiar to you. So before we close, I want to invite you into a little self-inquiry. Nothing to fix, nothing to judge, just curiosity. You can answer these questions quietly to yourself. You can journal about them later, or you can just notice what your body responds to. If you tend towards an anxious attachment, gently ask yourself, where in my life am I clinging? Where am I over focusing on someone else's availability? Where am I trying to control an outcome because letting go feels unsafe? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped trying so hard here? If you lean towards an avoidant attachment as a default, ask yourself, where do I feel enmeshed, engulfed, or overwhelmed in my relationships? Where does closeness feel like pressure instead of safety? Where might I be pulling away, not because I don't care, but because my nervous system needs space in order to feel safe? What would it feel like to take space without shutting down completely? If you lean towards an ambivalent or push-pull attachment as a default, ask yourself, where do I feel confused or stuck in my life? What relationships or situations do the signals feel mixed, sometimes safe, sometimes not? Where am I frozen because I don't have enough clarity to move forward or step back? And a great question to think of is, what information or boundary would help me feel safer right now to be able to choose or get into action? This is really important, and I'm going to say it again. Your nervous system never lies to you. It doesn't make things up. It doesn't randomly overreact, but it does sometimes respond to old information. So the alarm might be detecting a real threat in the present moment, a familiar threat from the past, or a story that feels true to the body. The work isn't to shut the alarm off. The work is to get curious. So stay tuned, because we are going to cover each one of these attachment styles in greater detail. But I haven't discussed the 4th attachment style, which is a secure attachment. That is the goal of our work. That's what my North Star is in working with individual clients, is that they have the ability to access a secure attachment. And when they shift back into familiar patterns or situations, that they have the ability to dust off, get back up, and get back to a secure attachment. So I'll talk more about secure attachment when it has its own episode. A secure attachment isn't the absence of alarms. It's the ability to notice activation in the body, regulate your nervous system, communicate clearly, be able to have boundaries in relationship, be able to have a relationship with yourself, and to be able to choose intentionally and authentically. A secure attachment isn't perfection. It's flexibility within relational dynamics. So humans are hardwired for connection. We need people, but more importantly, we need people we can trust. So understanding your attachment style doesn't label you. Please don't slap a label on you. I'm avoidant, I'm anxious. It liberates you. Because once you understand the alarm, you don't have to obey it. You can listen, regulate, and choose something more aligned. And that is how we build more peace in relationship with ourselves and others. So stay tuned. I am going to break down each attachment style in its own separate episode. You guys can try them on for size. We'll try to figure out what your default attachment style is. Per usual, thanks for being here. Thanks for being someone in this crazy world who's working on themselves, for the benefit of themselves and other people. I believe that's probably the biggest change we can contribute to the collective right now. So I'm so happy you're here, and I'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.